Welcome to Conversations Different, the podcast from the Santa Fe New Mexican about the interesting people and places of northern New Mexico. I'm Inez Russell Gomez, and this week we will be talking to Bill Church, the recently named executive editor for our 175-year-old newspaper.
Well, thank you, Inez, but did you say you needed someone interesting on this podcast?
Yeah, that's going to be you.
So does this mean that I am gone already?
No.
That you're not going to fill my time talking to me, because I'm not so sure I'm that interesting.
Well, you have to be, because otherwise our ratings will go down. And so welcome, and it's your second week at the job. So how are things going so far in Santa Fe?
Well, I'm only a couple centuries behind most of the residents here of Santa Fe and New Mexico in terms of knowledge. So I like to consider myself now a first-generation New Mexican. This way I get a little bit of sympathy and at the same time a little bit of understanding. I'll tell you, if you had told me even 2 months ago that I would have an opportunity to come to Santa Fe to work and live and eventually retire, I would just laugh at you and think, wow, wouldn't that be a great gig?
Oh, that's nice, because I think it's really important that people come here and want to be here. And I always tell everyone, it's one of the places, and there are other places, we're not as special as we think in Santa Fe. I always tell my friends from here that, but it's one of the places in the world where people introduce themselves by how long they've lived here, whether they're multi-generational and whether they were born and raised. As the saying is, I'm born here all my life. And if you're not that, at least could you say my great-great-great-grandfather lived here and now I'm back or whatever. But you, I think, understand that in a way that sometimes people who move here don't.
When I became the editor in Sarasota, one of my first experiences was at a convenience store, and I'm talking to this guy, and he introduces himself, and he says, I'm a seventh-generation Floridian.
Yep.
Now, all of us are going to laugh and think, Florida? Someone has lived there for 7 generations? But he was as serious as could be. And it's always a good lesson for us to understand that people identify closely with their family and where they live. And as a newspaper editor, particularly someone who's new to the community, if you don't appreciate that and you don't respect it, you're probably not going to be successful.
That is absolutely true. When I came here the first time to work at the newspaper, so I grew up in Las Vegas, went to Texas Tech, went to San Angelo, Texas to work, and I was lucky enough to get a job here. And one of the copy editors or Pasatiempo people used to laugh and call me a Texan. And I'm like, I am not a Texan. And he's like, well, you didn't go to high school here. And I did. And it was just really getting on my nerves. So I offered to take him on a tour of every place my grandparents and great-great-grandparents were buried, because my mom's people dated back 17 generations. And I knew every one of them. And that's how we were brought up. And I always say it doesn't make you know the place better, because some people don't understand anything anyway, but it gives you a sense of belonging that a lot of places in the United States don't have. And Florida, being so transient, you wouldn't think does, but the people who are from there, oh my gosh, they are fierce about it.
It's like that, I think, in every great community. There's an understanding of who we are. The difference in some of those communities, though, is their ability to be respectful and open to the newcomers that come. Because if you have a great community, people want to move there.
Yeah.
And if they want to move there, they also want to help understand what makes that community special. And I think Santa Fe exudes that of both its history and tradition and generational feel, and at the same time, dealing with what it means with all these newcomers who want to make Santa Fe their home. And so, there's a little bit of that creative tension that exists. Yeah. And at the same time, there has to be that understanding of acceptance.
No, and I think one of the issues in the present day that I've seen is that there is that understanding, but we keep getting a little bit of a new kind of newcomer where the people don't really accept it the way it is. It's not that they want to make it like a better, cleaner, more efficiently run place. They want to change it to wherever they were from. And a lot of times those people don't stay that long, but there's definitely a feeling in town from the longtime locals that's not necessarily wrong that the people who are moving here are a little different than the ones who came before. And that how we adjust that is going to determine Santa Fe's future.
I met a gentleman a couple weeks ago before it was actually the day of Zozobra, because we were at a special dinner, and he was telling me about the Raven, the well-known consignment shop. And he goes, "Go there, Bill, and take a look and tell me what you think, and tell me that those are folks who moved here from the East Coast, brought all of their goodies, came here to Santa Fe and realized it just didn't fit their new lifestyle.
And they sell it and go home."
And so I went to the Raven the following day, and sure enough, there were things that I didn't expect to see in Santa Fe. And I'm going, that's okay. Those are folks who are becoming part of the Santa Fe lifestyle.
It is definitely, if you come with like China, like the people that came over the Santa Fe Trail, it might get broken along the way, and you might end up, eating out of pottery or something once you get here.
Or maybe that China just becomes wall decor at the Plaza Cafe. Who knows?
Yeah, that's true. That is true. So you have worked a lot of places. You came from Raleigh, where you were the executive editor. And before that, though, how many papers have you worked at?
Well, let me give this background. Every place I've gone, I've assumed I was going to stay there. And I don't know if it's just DNA or what, but I'm a bit of a loyalist. And so I worked for a large company that owned a lot of newspapers, and they would come to me every 2 or 3 years and say, "We've got a problem in so-and-so market, and we think you would be a wonderful fit." And loyally, I would say, okay. And I think that sort of defined the first half of my year. First half of my career, I should say,
You were the fixer.
I was the fixer. But the second half of the year, you get a little more, second half of the career, you get a little more wisdom. You realize, and I think my wife has had a lot to do with this, you understand the value of quality of life and community and those connections. And I'm happy to say that really the changes that have happened to me have also benefited, I hope, the communities that I've lived in. And so I was in Raleigh and was expecting to stay in Raleigh. And then this opening came up in Santa Fe, and Pat Dorsey, my former publisher in Sarasota, reached out to me to talk about helping him find a new editor. And the more we talked and the more I got excited, and it was, I turned from consultant to pick me candidate.
So you're Dick Cheney of the newspaper world.
Oh.
Well, that wasn't nice. I'm
But
sorry.
Dick Cheney is like Liz's dad, right?
Yeah.
All right, I'm okay with that.
That's all right. Okay, on that note, we'll take a quick break and be back in a moment with Conversations Different.
Are you dreaming of a home of your own in Santa Fe but feel like it may never happen? HomeWise is here to help. We are a local nonprofit that has helped close to 7,000 New Mexicans from all income levels and backgrounds become homeowners. HomeWise has everything you need to succeed in home ownership, including free coaching and classes, real estate services, affordable fixed-rate mortgages with low down payments, and down payment assistance to qualified borrowers who meet income restrictions and credit qualifications. We'll be with you every step of the way. Get started today on your path to owning a home. Call 505-983-9473 or visit us at homewise.org. Equal Housing Lender, NMLS number 188231.
We are back with Conversations Different, talking to Bill Church, the new executive editor for the New Mexican. Let's talk about your experiences with Santa Fe in the past, because you were, I won't say you were a brat, but you grew up in a family that traveled a lot because of the military. And you ended up in Oklahoma.
I was a definite military brat, pretty proud of it.
All right. I didn't want to, brat as a pejorative term. I wanted to be, gentle. But so you end up in Oklahoma and you go to the University of Oklahoma and start working in newspapers. When did you first know there was a Santa Fe and start coming here?
So I'm happy to say that I committed to the University of Oklahoma when I was in the 4th grade.
That's sad.
Oh, that is not sad. But, you were promised not to talk about tech, and you dropped the tech reference like 2 minutes into this podcast, Inez. So I just hope your listeners understand that we're picking up on the nuances here of what's going to be a burgeoning relationship. But I put together my first newspaper when I was in the 4th grade, got sent to the principal's office. The first and only time I had a good experience in the principal's office because they announced on the loudspeaker that me and my best friend, Terry Couch, had put out this newspaper. And I thought things were all good at that point. But, as a military family, we moved to Japan. The only English-speaking outlets I had were Sesame Street and Stars and Stripes.
Okay.
And I read Stars and Stripes every day.
Yeah. And that was a great newspaper.
Oh my gosh, It was a great newspaper. And it was what sort of inspired my early love of newspapers, because I didn't realize we were poor. I mean, we had 4 kids. My dad was a staff sergeant, a bit stubborn and independent like myself, but we had a newspaper every day delivered to our house. And so it became how I learned about the world.
And you did learn about the world because in those days, newspapers were packed full of stuff.
Exactly. In many ways, still like the Santa Fe New Mexican, still has nation and world news, which is missing from a lot of community newspapers. But I went to the University of Oklahoma to be an economics professor.
Oh, wow. And then you graduated with distinction, I saw.
That happened. Who knows why? I must have shown up to class a few times. Actually, I had a wonderful honors economics professor who just recently retired that sort of inspired my interest and love of behavioral analytics, which sounds as nerdy as it is, but has been so helpful in how I think as a newspaper editor. Went to graduate school, was going to be a economics professor, and the poor sap that lived next to me in the graduate student dorm was a Medill journalism student.
Okay.
And he is probably owns several Subway franchises right now because there's no way he made it in journalism. I rewrote a lot of his papers.
So you were his helper.
I might have been his helper, but it told me I didn't want to be an economics professor.
You wanted to be an editor because that's what you do.
I needed to be a journalist because I love getting the news before everyone else and just helping people understand issues. And I think for most journalists these days, and the public's perception of most journalists is that we're rote robots, that all we're doing is chronicling history. Our role is greater than that. And you know that, Inez, in your role as our editorial page editor. In many ways, if you're doing your job well, you are helping the community understand and at the same time find those solutions to the problems that happen even in wonderful world-class communities like Santa Fe.
No, that's one of the goals that Robin Martin, the owner of the paper, has for the editorial page, is that it's a place for community conversation, that people are civil, and that you look for solutions. And I always say the people who write letters and who write my views come up with better ideas half the time than most of the people in town who are running things. We have some really sharp citizens and readers. And one of the, I think, blessings of this newspaper and why we've been here for 175 years is that there's a connection between the community. You know, I always say how many papers in the country when the pandemic happened had their citizens pitch in to buy ads for the paper so that we'd stay in business and say thank you for continuing your work. And every time I think about it, I get teary-eyed because, you know, it happened. All of our advertisers had to shut down and we, you know, went on water and bread rations to keep going, and people started helping us.
That is such a wonderful point. And yet I think that's one of the unfortunate consequences of what's happened in our industry. And we have a lot of residents in Santa Fe who come from other communities and have seen their newspapers
Die.
shrivel,
Yeah.
die, become less relevant. And I had a wonderful publisher one time who reminded me that great communities, great cities need great newspapers, but great newspapers also need great cities. And it's that synchronistic relationship that is paramount to our survival. It's also paramount to the community that we serve. If we don't do that, if we don't pay attention, if we don't resonate, if we don't challenge, then we put ourselves at risk. We put the democracy of our nation at risk. And I know that sounds very idealistic, but it's true because its deterioration starts in small components.
No, I mean, I always tell people we have to compare ourselves to other newspapers as opposed to the way we were in the 90s and the 2000s, because this newspaper was always not overstaffed for the needs of the community. But if you took the industry average, like 1 per 1,000 or whatever it used to be for your newspaper, the owner always invested more in the paper. And we had just a really great staff of reporters, senior to beginners and extras, that you had someone who had nothing to do but go look up stuff. And now we're at a point where we still have people who do that, but they also have to do 2 city council stories or whatever. So it's a much harder job to hold the powerful to account. And I think how we balance that is really, really important.
But isn't every job hard?
It is, but it was a lot easier when you had 15 reporters than when you have 6.
Yeah. And of course, I always advocate for more staff.
Yes.
I also believe that there's a reality of we have to be able to adapt and move.
Totally.
And we found this through the pandemic. We have found this anytime that there have been challenges in our industry. Our ability to adapt, our ability to change doesn't preclude us from doing kick-ass journalism.
No, it doesn't. And if you can adapt and change, then you close. I mean, one of the things from the pandemic, from a consumer point of view, is the pizza place that really learned to deliver pizza to your curb very safely and also sold you eggs and flour and sugar and butter or whatever you needed is still there doing great, and other places shut down. And it was fascinating to see who's adapting, who's not adapting. And, we adapted as a newsroom by doing our virtual meetings and all the stuff. And we didn't come back here for like over a year. It was New Mexico was more shut down than a lot of places.
So I fell in love in part with Santa Fe because of the pandemic. We're living in Austin, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
The one safe place you have is your car.
Yep, or your house.
Or your house,
yep.
Exactly. So why not? I think it took us 13 hours the first day. There wasn't much open in Santa Fe at the time. Tiasapia was open, of course. And yet my wife and I are saying, we want to be back. We want to be back. And so, when this opportunity arose, I mean, we're sitting there thinking about all of our Santa Fe experiences. And by no means are we world-class art collectors, but we're sitting in the living room talking about this. And I'm going, you realize we bought that in Santa Fe. We bought that in Santa Fe. We bought that in Santa Fe. And we remember when, where, the moment. And it's those moments that I'm sorry, but I don't mind being an idealist and a romanticist. But that helped kind of seal the deal for us, is we didn't feel we were moving to a strange place. Santa Fe was with us the entire time we were in Raleigh and Austin. And so in many ways, it's those unintended consequences of events in your life. And as horrific as the pandemic was, there was also resiliency that came out of it from Americans, from this newspaper, from everyone, in terms of we've got to figure out a solution. We got to figure out our future.
Yeah, that is totally the truth. And on that note, we'll be back in a moment with another segment of Conversations Different.
Thanks, Inez. This is Patrick Dorsey, publisher of the Santa Fe New Mexican. We hope you're enjoying this episode of Conversations Different with Inez Russell Gomez. Great local content is only possible with a talented staff dedicated to bringing you the best local content possible. For that staff to do its work, we need your support by subscribing to the Santa Fe New Mexican. If you're already a subscriber, thank you. And if not, there's never been a better time to subscribe. In addition to our home-delivered newspaper that comes with full digital access, we also provide digital-only subscriptions for SantaFeNewMexican.com. We'll also be releasing more online-only audio and video programming moving forward. The Santa Fe New Mexican has been here for nearly 175 years, and we want to continue being your source for local news and information. Visit us at SantaFeNewMexican.com/subscribe or call us at 505-986-3010. Thank you.
We are back with Conversations Different, talking to Bill Church. He is the new executive editor. And let me ask you a question. What is an executive editor versus an editor? Because before we used to have an editor.
Wow, that is a question I'm not so sure I can answer. I get a lot.
It looks snazzier on a card, I think.
It looks great on a card. I think if my title was editor, I'd probably just have rolled sleeves and a tie dangling.
I was going to say, you're dressing too well for this place.
Yeah,
I want you to.
I think it's the executive editor title. I've just kind of gotten used to it. I once had an editor named Jess Price, wonderful. He was the opinion page editor in Richmond, Indiana. And Jess, matter of factly, came up to me one day, and I thought he was getting rid of me or something. And Jess said, we won't miss you, at least for a month if you leave here. And I said,
That's so mean.
I said, what are you talking about, Jess? Did I do something to irritate you? He goes, no, you've... Day to day, we know what to do now. But a month from now, I'm not so sure we'll understand where we're going. And I thought, in your obtuse way, Jess, I think you just paid me a compliment.
That is.
And I think that what describes as an executive editor. It's less my job to sweat over a headline. It's more my job to help make sure Robin's vision of the Santa Fe New Mexican being here for 100 more years, that's my responsibility. And that's what motivates me on a day-to-day basis. But, the nuances of, I think, being a good editor or executive editor these days is understand that your responsibility is to the community, but also to your staff. It is more important than ever before to do that balancing act of being empathetic, visionary, and at the same time saying, we need to do this because we have to fill a gap in the community in terms of coverage, needs, and so forth. And it's not an easy mix. And at the same time, even after all these years, I get it wrong.
Mm-hmm. But you get it right, too.
Yeah, occasionally get it right, too.
Yeah. Well, probably more than occasionally, or you wouldn't keep getting, so many fancy jobs. One of the things in your career, because diversity is getting a bad name nowadays. It's like you don't want to be woke. You don't want to be diverse. You have to get the best person for whatever job, which somehow usually turns out to be a white guy. But that is not a nice thing to say. But you have a real record of achieving diversity. And I love where it said of audience as well as staff. So why is that important to you, and how have you done that in your many different jobs?
I think it's a natural inclination. And Inez, you deal with engaged subscribers who have a clear understanding of who they're going to vote for in November. And anything that is even close to questioning their candidate, they deny.
Yep,
but, we have to be okay with that.
Yeah.
Because at the same time, you and I can argue which was the better quarterback it doesn't matter.
That's
As
right.
long as we have that engaged discussion, it makes a big difference. And I think the reality is every issue at some point, it feels like, particularly in the last couple of years, has become so politicized from an outlier perspective, and diversity is one of them. If you think of it in the most simple terms, we are two people who didn't even know each other until a couple weeks ago, different backgrounds, probably different politically, and yet we can figure out a way to coexist and talk and think and even laugh together. My mother is 92 years old, born in Japan. I never met my grandfather because he was killed in a bombing during World War II.
Oh,
I just learned this a few years ago. My mother is about a diehard Republican as you can be. 92-year-old Japanese-born, naturalized American citizen, living in Oklahoma.
the reddest state in the country.
The reddest state in the country. And I definitely know who she's voting for in November. That's what diversity is.
Yeah, yeah.
It doesn't matter to me. And, and I know how my brothers and my sister are going to vote. Let's just say there won't be a consensus. And yet, isn't this what it really is all about? Diversity to me is helping us understand the differences. And at the same time, making sure we don't overlook that these differences don't create opportunities and an understanding of each other.
No, I think that's really important. I think as a newspaper, it's important to always seek to have a few members from the community who know it. I remember once, I had gone to Taos to be the editor of the Taos News, and we had a horrific killing in which two boys threw somebody off the Rio Grande Gorge Bridge. And we were covering, it was a weekly paper, and it happened on a Wednesday past my deadline. And Daniel Chacon was a young reporter at the New Mexican in those days before he went off and then later came back. And he speaks beautiful Spanish, Norteño Spanish, and he goes to Rancho de Taos and walks into the home of the grandparents of the suspected killer and gets this incredible interview with him that my wonderful reporter, who was great, but did not speak Spanish and could not go in that house, did not get. So we basically cribbed it from him and then got our own angle. And by the next week, had caught up because we were a weekly paper. But I always think about those moments when you have the right person to get the story. And if you're not careful in your hiring, you don't have that person.
It's so true. I believe among the things I'm most proud of in Raleigh is how much I learned from our 20-something journalists that we hired from varying backgrounds on why they wanted to be journalists, and my realization that I needed to adapt in terms of how I thought. Now, I still wore a tie every day to work.
Right.
They made fun of me, but at the same time, the understanding of mental health issues in young journalists.
And they want more time for their lives.
Exactly.
And they're probably
trying
right.
to figure out that balance
Yes.
and how important it was because they want to be journalists. So how do we make sure that happens?
Yeah, I think that's because diversity isn't just, ethnicity. It's not just religion. It can be the fact that, one time I had 4 reporters who all went to the University of California and had a master's degree. And we were like, no, we're not hiring any more people from there because they had the same kind of background. So you want young people, you want middle-aged people, you want people who've just been here. And I've gone a little bit too long, but before we go, I want to ask you one more question. What are some of the things that might be different, like, more digital initiatives, different areas of coverage that we might not be doing that you see that when you got here? So what can we expect?
That there may be a little bit of pause here because I want to make sure that this doesn't scare anyone away. I think we need to think bigger. Mm-hmm. I think we need to act bigger. This is a solid newspaper, but in some ways, I don't think we realize the opportunity in front of us. Santa Fe is the soul of New Mexico. we not only should be thinking about Santa Fe as our audience, but we should be thinking digitally about New Mexico as our audience. And my aspiration is for us to think more from an enterprise perspective on topics that connect both New Mexico and Santa Fe. And do I have clear answers? No, but I think some of the things that our readers and subscribers will see in the coming months will give a good indication. My first month here is all about listening. But we've already added one newsletter. We're going to add another one here very soon. So, just stick with us. Yeah. I think it's going to be worth the experience and the ride.
Well, that's good. And on that note, this has been another Conversations Different. We'll be back next week.